You've probably experienced it without realizing what it was. You're outside. Maybe it's a morning in late spring, maybe mid-afternoon in summer. The air's warm. There's a breeze moving through the leaves, just slightly. And somewhere nearby, birds are singing. Not one bird, several. Overlapping, layered, filling the background the way sound always does, when you're not really paying attention to it. And then, without warning, it stops. Not gradually, not one by one, all at once. The yard goes quiet in a way that feels different from ordinary quiet. It doesn't feel like absence. It feels like held breath. Like something in the air just changed, and everything around you noticed before you did. Most people register it for a second, maybe two. Then they go back to whatever they were doing. They assume a car passed, or a door slammed somewhere down the street, or the birds just moved on. It doesn't seem important. Why would it? But here's what's actually happening in that moment. That silence is not empty. It is information. Dense, structured, layered behavioral information passed between animals that have been communicating in exactly this way for millions of years. And you, standing in your yard or on your porch or pausing at your window, are receiving a signal that was never designed for you, but that you can learn to read. Let's start not with the silence, but with what comes before it. Birdsong is not decoration. We tend to experience it that way, as ambient sound, as something pleasant running in the background of a morning. But song in birds is fundamentally a form of broadcasting. A male songbird singing from a branch in your yard is doing several things simultaneously. He's marking the edge of his territory, signaling to potential mates that he is present and healthy, and doing something that's easy to overlook. He is telling the entire neighborhood that things are fine. That last function is the one most people never think about. When birds sing, they are not only communicating with their own species, they are participating in what researchers call the acoustic landscape, a continuously updated, real-time description of what is happening in a given area. And other species listen to it, not because they understand the content of each other's songs, but because active birdsong is one of the most reliable indicators in nature that the immediate environment is safe. A robin calling from a rooftop, a sparrow working through its morning phrases in the hedge by your fence, a wren rattling away from somewhere deep in the shrubs. These sounds tell every other bird and many other animals in earshot. No predators are nearby. Things are calm. You can go about your business. This is why the silence arrives so suddenly. It's not that one bird decides to stop and the others slowly follow. It's that one bird sees something or senses something and goes quiet. And in going quiet, it removes its voice from the acoustic landscape. The bird next to it notices the gap. It goes quiet too. And within seconds, a wave of silence moves outward from whatever caused the first bird to stop, spreading through the trees, across the yard, and sometimes across several properties at once. What you hear, or rather what you suddenly stop hearing, is that wave reaching you. Scientists who study animal behavior have a name for this. They call it the acoustic alarm cascade. The concept is straightforward. Certain birds are more sensitive to specific threats, and when they go silent, or give a very particular call, others follow immediately. The silence itself becomes the signal. What makes this remarkable is how precisely calibrated it is. Birds don't go silent for everything. A lawnmower running next door doesn't cause it, not after the first few times. A dog barking in the distance won't produce it. Even a neighbor walking through the yard might barely register. The silence that feels different, that particular deep, spreading stillness, is almost always responding to something specific. An aerial predator, a hawk, a falcon, something fast, moving through open sky. If you've ever watched birds at a feeder during one of these moments, you've already seen something you may not have had a name for. A finch stops mid-movement at the feeder and becomes completely still, unnaturally still, like a frame from a video that suddenly paused. Others drop instantly into dense cover, into the interior of a thick shrub or under the overhang of a porch, and disappear. The ones in more exposed positions press themselves flat against branches, reducing their visible silhouette to almost nothing. And then they wait. The posture is consistent across species. Head raised, eyes scanning, wings slightly tensed against the body. They are ready to move in an instant, but they are also doing something else in those seconds of stillness. They are listening. Not necessarily for the predator itself. They are listening for any other bird to begin again, because the moment one voice returns to the acoustic landscape, the information changes. One bird resuming its song means, I no longer perceive a threat in my immediate area, and that signal spreads outward almost as fast as the silence did. There is a bird that researchers often point to as one of the most important actors in the system. You've almost certainly heard it without knowing its role. The American robin is not simply a common bird. In many North American yards and neighborhoods, it functions as something close to a keystone species of the acoustic landscape. Robins sing frequently. They sing with carrying power, and they have a very specific alarm call, a sharp, rapid, high-pitched series of notes that sounds almost like agitated laughter that is recognized and responded to by dozens of other species. Birds that share no social relationship with robins, that wouldn't respond to a robin song in any other context, will freeze or scatter the moment that particular alarm call cuts through the air. This kind of cross-species alarm recognition has been documented carefully in research settings, and what it reveals matters. The birds in your yard are not simply coexisting. They are, in a very real functional sense, watching out for each other. Not through conscious intention, but because over thousands of generations, the birds that paid attention to the robin's alarm survived better than the ones that didn't. And so, that attention became wired in, embedded in behavior, passed forward. Your yard, or the park near your house, or the street trees you pass every morning, is threaded through with these relationships. Species that nest in different locations, eat different food, have no apparent reason to interact, are still connected through the shared system of acoustic information. The silence you hear is the entire network responding at once. It's worth understanding what a hawk actually looks like from a small bird's perspective, because it explains why the response is so extreme. A Cooper's hawk, one of the most common predators of songbirds in suburban and woodland edge environments, is not built to soar and drop from height. It moves through trees. It uses branches, fences, dense hedgerows, and the structure of the landscape itself is cover, flying low and fast, changing direction suddenly, keeping obstacles between itself and its target until the last possible moment. From a small bird's perspective, a Cooper's hawk can seem to materialize out of nowhere. The air was clear. Then something fast is already in the yard. The birds that survive these encounters are the ones that had warning from somewhere else in the network. The bird at the far edge of your property, the one you barely notice sitting in the back hedge, might detect the hawk approaching 2 or 3 full seconds before the bird at your feeder has any angle to see it. In a fast-moving predator encounter, 2 or 3 seconds is enormous. It is the difference between reaching cover and not. So the alarm cascade, the spreading silence, is not just one bird's reaction. It is a network of eyes distributed across the yard, the trees, the roof lines, all processing the same sky from different angles, all feeding information into a shared acoustic channel in real time. The silence is the sound of that whole network going into alert mode simultaneously. There's something worth pausing on here, because it shifts how the whole yard looks. Most of the time, the birds in your immediate surroundings appear to be living entirely separate lives. The sparrows are doing sparrow things. The robins are doing robin things. They're not flocking together, not coordinating in any visible way. And yet, underneath that apparent independence, there is a structure, a shared infrastructure of attention and signal that connects them all, that any one of them can activate at any moment, and that all of them are continuously monitoring. You are standing at the edge of that structure. Not inside it, your presence itself is a piece of data that birds are quietly evaluating every time you step outside, but adjacent to it, connected to it in ways most people never consider. Here's something that makes this more concrete. If you spend time outside regularly, in the same yard, walking the same route, sitting on the same porch, the birds in that area have almost certainly formed a working model of you. This sounds strange, but it is well supported by research. Birds in areas with consistent human presence develop habituation. They distinguish between a familiar, non-threatening presence and an unfamiliar one. They lower their alarm threshold for the person they recognize. They maintain a higher one for strangers. Studies on American crows have demonstrated this in striking detail. Individual crows can recognize specific human faces and hold on to that recognition for years. A crow that experienced something threatening from a person wearing a particular hat responded with alarm calls to that same hat months later, even when it was worn by a different person entirely. The crow was not reacting to a human in general. It was reacting to stored, specific information. The birds in your yard are doing a quieter version of this with you every day. Your regular movements, your predictable timing, your general non-threat behavior, it has been observed, processed, and filed. You are part of the landscape they have learned to read. Your presence, on some level, contributes to their sense of whether the area is safe. This brings us back to the silence, but from a different angle now. When you are outside during an alarm silence, you are not standing apart from the event. You were already there before it happened. The birds had already incorporated your presence into their assessment of the environment. You weren't the trigger, and so when the silence falls, you are inside it, not observing it from a distance. You are surrounded by the same held breath that every other creature in that yard is holding. The finch, frozen at the feeder. The sparrow pressed flat against the fence post. The robin that dropped into the lower branches of the hedge and went still. And you, standing there with your coffee or your pruning shears or nothing at all, suddenly aware that the sound is gone. You are all in the same moment, waiting for the same thing. And when the first bird begins again, tentatively, just a few notes, as if testing whether it's safe to exist audibly, and then a second voice joins from somewhere across the yard, and then gradually, over the next 30 or 40 seconds, the full acoustic landscape reassembles itself, layer by layer, species by species. What you're hearing is the network coming back online. The threat has passed. The information has been updated. Everything returns to what it was doing before. There's something about this that makes ordinary mornings sound different once you know it. The overlapping birdsong you've always heard as background, the phrases you couldn't separate, the calls you never identified. That is a living, continuously updated report on the state of the immediate world. Every voice in it is a data point. Every gap is information. The whole thing running quietly behind your day is one of the oldest communication systems still operating on Earth. And the silence that occasionally moves through it, sudden, total, slightly unsettling in a way you could never quite explain, is that system doing exactly what it was built to do. Responding to something real. Passing the information. Waiting together. You've been hearing it your whole life. You just didn't know what it was. Now you do. And the next time the yard goes quiet in that particular way, you won't reach for your phone. You won't assume it was nothing. You'll look up. You'll wait. And for a moment, standing still in the middle of a silence that was never meant for you but found you anyway, you'll be part of the oldest conversation still happening in the world.